Hello, so today we'll be talking about Chapter 4 and 5 of Pauline Gibbons' Scaffolding Language, Scaffolding Learning. Chapter 4 is called From Speaking to Writing in the Content Classroom, and it starts off with talking about literate talk, which serves as a bridge between actively related talk and more formal written registers of subject learning. And Mode Continuum illustrates the development of language as it transitions from spoken to written language. And we can do so through these 4 stages. And through these stages, you'll see that the children gradually learn to use language in ways that are more appropriate to the context that they are in. So stage 1 is doing the experiment. And through small group work, children are learning about science or whatever the subject content is, even though they may not be using scientific language yet. And individual utterances become longer and more explicit. Stage 2 is introducing key vocabulary. So in this stage, students were given the opportunity to develop understanding in stage 1 before learning the academic vocabulary in stage 2. And now students are able to apply their understanding of the experiment that they did in stage 1 to that specific academic language. Stage 3 is teacher-guided reporting. And this is when the teacher helps students make sense of the learning by talking with them through the process and introducing that new language. And this creates a context for students to rehearse the language and vocabulary that were closer to written discourse, or what we referred to earlier as literate talk. And in this stage, teacher sets up a context that allows students to initiate specific topic of exchange. So when learners initiate what they wish to talk about, language learning is facilitated because they enter the discourse on their own terms rather than responding to a specific request for information from the teacher. Finally, in stage 4 is journal writing. So students take what they have learned through the experiment in stage 1, through the discussion in stage 2, and the teacher-guided reporting in stage 3, and turn it into a written reflection. And the students' writing reflected the wordings that, hopefully, it reflects the wording that they had used in the interaction with the teacher, or that had been part of the teacher's recasting. So academic language is more easily understood when it is built on the context of prior learning and experiences, and that's why these 4 stages are so important. Chapter 5 is called Learning to Write in a Second Language and Culture, and first we'll talk about some of the challenges that our EL learners may go through while learning to write. One of them is trying to grasp the concept of print, which are sound-symbol relationships, directionality, and the notion that written symbols are not arbitrary but fixed. Also, they may struggle with organizational structure when they're writing. Next, we talked about genre, which are a range of ways in which things got done through language in a particular society or a culture. And although there are multiple genres out there, what they all have in common is that it occurs within a culture, it has a specific social purpose, it has a particular overall organizational structure, and it is characterized by specific linguistic features. There are 2 main types of written genres in school, which are narrative and arguments. So continuing on with Chapter 5, next we talk about explicit teaching, which puts emphasis on the need for learner guidance by the teacher. And this explicit teaching is related to real-life use so that understanding about language is developed in the context of the actual language use. And in order to practice explicit teaching, we talked about the teaching and the learning cycle, which aims to foster active student involvement and allows for the integration of subject teaching and language teaching. There's 4 stages. Stage 1 is building the field. Stage 2, modeling the genre. Stage 3 is joint construction, and stage 4 is independent writing. And finally, it's very important for us teachers to assess the student writing afterwards because it lets us gauge the current abilities of the student and it allows for subsequent teaching to be responsive. And because we have to know what the learner is able to do alone before we know what to scaffold next. And finally, it's important to note that the more time we have spent on these stages of the teaching and learning cycle, and the more planned and responsive the scaffolding is, the more likely it is that students will write effectively, feel that they have control over what they are writing, and gain confidence in using written language.